sitting here after my workout. I'll read some from Torch, still burning brightly. And usually when I have read to y'all aloud, I usually try and choose the short stories because I know people get bored easily, especially when someone is reading. Either get bored or antsy or get sleepy. Because I know if I try to read at night before I go to bed, I'll fall asleep before I'm finished reading. Or before I'm finished reading one page. So the name of this story is, for those people that don't know, may have somebody new. I said that the name of the book and the title of the book. I'll tell you what I'm reading. These stories in this book is about 25 ovarian cancer survivors. Well, all of them didn't survive, so I can't say survivors. But at the time that they wrote the book, they were still living. Some of them are here still, and some of them are not. I know a few of them that are not still living, and one of them is my wife. So this story is called, the title of the lady that wrote this story is Contradictions. And let me see, her name is Penny Bourque, I think it's pronounced Bourque. I think it looks like her husband finished it out for her, so I'm thinking that she didn't make it to finish her story, so he finished it out. Okay, Contradictions. Forgive me for that sound, but it's my heater. It's chilly in here. Are you strong enough to be my man? Asked Sheryl Crow in her popular song of 1995. As I drove home, listening to the lyrics and contemplated the past few years, I realized that I may not feel as if I am. However, I believe I can answer yes. Arriving at this answer has taken me on a journey few would want to venture. I certainly did not. And yet, with a few faithful words, the journey began. Your wife has cancer. The rest was unimportant. I heard something about ovaries and grapefruit and stage 3 ovarian cancer. I remember telling Dr. Stringer that we have life insurance, as if the money could magically buy off the cancer. He continued explaining about the surgery. I heard none of it. It was like being shot. The pain was intense, searing through my consciousness, plunging me into despair. Cancer. To me, the word was synonymous with death. My wife of 15 years was going to die. I lost all rational thought. I felt numb. I felt rage. I felt weak. I so wanted him to lie to me, tell me that all was going to be all right. Please tell me. I promise I'll believe. Instead of cold facts sank in slowly. I later told my wife Penny the diagnosis. We cried, I cried, she slept on. We became travelers on a journey no one should have to take. The next day after surgery, Dr. Stringer came in and talked to us again. Even though we knew what he was saying, we really didn't know. This, this new reality was and is full of contradictions. Penny would start chemotherapy in a few weeks. We learned about debulking, the act of removing as much of the cancer as a surgeon can. We learned about this gigantic experiment called chemotherapy, a chemical that kills the cancer and the good cells. Somehow, this killing and its many side effects makes the cancer go away. We learned about steroids and anti-nausea medication. The map began to come together. We learned the rules as we went along. We learned that feeling like hell was good, another contradiction on our journey. Our ability to deal with this killer improved. Through our research, her support group, and talks with Dr. Stringer, we developed more coping mechanism and began to feel more comfortable with this reality. We persevered, enduring the almost financial devastation, emergency room visits, and the endless days of her being sick. As for me, I focused on what sanity I had left. For the longest time, I wanted to shoot something. The tears of rage and sorrow welled up, but would not come. Feeling like hell became my reality. The contradictions piled up, and Penny began to look better. She went off chemotherapy, and the world seemed well. Yet the hush of fear hung over us. Fear that the cancer would return. Once again, I hoped Penny's doctor would lie to me. Again, he didn't. We returned to our alternate reality in the Twilight Zone. For 4 years, this was our life. We thought we were prepared for the worst. We weren't. How can anyone be prepared? After all, it would never happen to me. We had just finished a long drive from Dallas to Albuquerque, a drive made longer by the circumstances of her father's death from cancer. He was to be buried at the Memorial Cemetery in Santa Fe, New Mexico. No one really wants to go to a funeral, and yet we needed to. Penny needed to. Her father was a big part of her life, and watching his death foreshadowed her own to come. The closure was needed. Once again, the cancer struck, this time in an insidious and cruel manner. Instead of her being able to go to her father's funeral, we spent a week in an Albuquerque hospital. Her doctor was kind and helpful. He spoke to me about staying with her. We spoke of the odds. Was this her time? It seemed to be close. The Delft bookies gave her 90 days. A week later, we all flew back to Dallas. Penny to Baylor via air ambulance, Michelle and I via commercial airline. From that point on, we learned about total parental nutrition, pain, bowel obstructions, radiation therapy, among other things. The arsenal was being whittled down. The cancer was winning. We persevered, the council making up new rules as it went about its cruel business. Spending my time with Penny began a new dance. A dance involving many mouths and many partners, and multiple partners. Penny, Michelle, my mother, her mother, the home and work. My business was closed, and I took on a job. As my dreams and aspirations began to crumble around me once again, I began to look closely at Penny. The more closely I watched and learned, the more I began to see that life is more than what I wanted. It is something less tangible than a house, a car, a business. And yet, as cancer has taught us, it is a contradiction as well. Life is the small things and yet the big things. You don't care about the dishes being put in the washer right then. You don't care about the guy that cuts you off. You just don't care. They are not important, but neither is the big vacation or the big promotion. What is important is the moment in time between the butterfly's wings as they move. What is important is the smell of the rose. What is important is the time you have today with the one you care about. And yet, as this contradiction of little and big continues, you learn that the bigger picture is just as valuable as the smallest flower. This is the lesson of life. A year after Albuquerque, once again I contemplated the reality of this existence. The cancer has progressed and introduced us to palliative care. Penny's life is coming to an end, yet a new life is just beginning. For me and my daughter, it will be one of sorrow, sadness, and coping. For her, it will be one of joy. Penny once told me that she missed the memo dealing with bowel obstruction, swollen bellies, and the like. However, the cancer got it, and we learned about palliative care. Although you would think that palliative care and hospice are the same, it turns out that it is not so. Palliative care teaches you ways to cope with death. For the first time, we were truly faced with the dreaded D word. Ecclesiastes 3:1-8 tells us, "For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven." And such death is just another matter under heaven. As I become more of a visitor to Penny on her journey and less of a companion, I find her compassion growing. To quote the Tibetan Book of the Living and Dying, I might have pronounced that word wrong, but it's spelled Tibetan, of the living and dying. We start to have a burning, almost heartbreaking sense of fragile and preciousness of each moment and each being. And from this can grow a deep, clear, limitless compassion for all beings. I can't talk tonight. We learn that death is not some large figure in a black cape to be feared, but a new season under heaven. We both know what lies ahead. We both know the hardships will mount. We both know the journey will surely end. Penny's journey will physically weaken her. We will continue on together as long as we can, despite the sorrowness and sadness being left for the living. There is a moment of joy and peace that is stronger than all the sorrow we will feel. Penny will have attained a place in heaven we all hope for. As for me, I watch Penny blossom as she approaches death. I can only hope that I am as selfless. I too have changed and grown stronger, but I can only hope to approach her level. Of all the people who have a right to complain, she does not. How can weakness beget such strength? How can cancer be life? And then I think she must have passed away because her husband, or either got too weak to finish her story out, and her husband wrote this part that I'm reading now. I wrote the above text 5.5 months before her death. Or maybe her husband wrote the story for her. Okay. As he said, I wrote the above text 5.5 months before her death, and even now marvel at how the next few months went. There were times of great sorrow and preparation. During this time, I watched her body weaken and her spirit strengthen. We found ourselves saying goodbye early and spending the remainder of her days preparing for the future. Not hers, but mine and Michelle's. How odd to work with her on a future she would never know of. Here, both hospice and palliative care helped tremendously. By the time she died on December 17, we were ready. Michelle and I were to continue our journey, knowing that she left us fully prepared at the crossroads of life. Her death was announced to the world at 6:02 a.m. with such simple words. After a long battle and a wonderful life, Penny was called to heaven this morning. We are all going to miss her. May she be in Jesus' arms. We love you, Penny. And this was written by David Barquette, her husband. Last name is spelled Bourque, and I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. And so that is that story. I'm looking for another story. Like I said, I always try to find when I was reading the stories out loud, live, I always try to find the short stories. So now that I'm doing the upload, I can find the long stories. Here's one. Let's see. Okay. This story is called Trip of a Lifetime. My late husband, Leon, and I were privileged to travel together to many places over the years, in some cases, combining business with pleasure. It seems to me no coincidence that his final illness, which was a major stroke, began while we were traveling to Kirksville, Missouri, to attend the wedding of our grandson Cliff in June 2007. Another journey had begun for me the previous January, one that I am currently traveling, that of primary perennial cancer. I may spell that, I pronounced that wrong, but it's Peritonel. I had thought I was home free once I had my knees replaced, one in August 2005 and the other in April 2006, and my broken Achilles tendon repaired in November 2005. For the first Christmas in many years, I had actually enjoyed shopping at the malls without the pain I had endured with each step I took. There was this little nagging stomach distress, probably another bout of diverticulitis. I thought, and I called my gastro doctor for a round of antibiotics when rest and a liquid diet didn't clear it up. Do you want to come in for an exam? Asked his nurse, to which I replied, no, the doctor said I didn't have to come back for 5 years, and I'm now near that. I'm going to keep him at his word. So in January 2007, hardly able to button my pants over my expanding belly, I finally called and told the nurse that yes, I'd better get an appointment because the antibiotics didn't seem to work. Dr. Sandoval came into the exam room, took one look at me, and without further examination said, let's see, you still have your ovaries, don't you? One, I told him. This is not intestinal, he said, and ordered a CT scan the next day. As soon as he saw the scan, he asked me to make an appointment with my gynecologist. A couple of days later, Dr. Schrammenhorn asked me to call my husband into the room, even though I told him he had a slight mental deficit and might not fully understand. We need him in here, said the doctor. So both of us heard the news that in all probability I had ovarian cancer, but that surgery was the only way it could be confirmed. He referred me for an immediate appointment with Texas Oncology, and surgery was scheduled for February 2nd, 2007. One of my sisters died in 1999 with stage 4 ovarian cancer. After it was diagnosed during what she thought was going to be a gallbladder surgery. I knew only enough to know that my chances for recovery weren't very good. But I was truly alarmed when Dr. Schrammenhorn going over the statistics told us it'll get you. I wasn't feeling bad. In fact, with my new needs, I was ready to tackle the world. How could it get me when I had so many other plans and responsibilities? I just don't have time for any more surgery. I've just gotten back into the routine of a part-time nanny for Claire, balancing those duties with taking care of my husband, Leon. I guess I was in denial right up to the time of the surgery, thinking erroneously I was indispensable. How wrong I was. The debulking surgery was much harder than I expected, and the doctor was able to remove only 85% of the 90% of the stage 3 carcinomatosis, hoping chemotherapy would eliminate the remaining tumors that were entwined in and around my intestines. I was so bummed out that I made the most horrible patient, uncooperative, just wanting to go ahead and die and not go through chemotherapy, even after I was released to come home. I was so disappointed that I might not be able to work and remain active until I was 90, as had my father. Of course, then I thought I wouldn't live any longer than my sister did following her surgery, which was about 14 months. So I selfishly around, whined around, upsetting my family and well-meaning friends. And I truly have a wonderful family and support group who tried to comfort me. I guess I know at least I'll never be a widow. I said to my sweetheart, "You don't know that," he said. How much wiser he always was throughout our 57 years of marriage. Around the 1st of March, I quit my whining long enough to begin the chemotherapy, the usual Taxol and carboplatin. Of course, I suffered nausea and went through dehydration, low blood counts, transfusions, and several more hospitalizations. By late May, however, I was feeling well enough for us to plan to go to the wedding of our grandson, Cliff, and his bride, Rika. So we flew to St. Louis on June 13th and drove to Kirksville for the rehearsal dinner that night. Leon was a little quieter than usual, but didn't have any other symptoms besides those we'd been living with for a long time. By the end of the dinner, though, he was unable to walk to the car without help. He was a little wakeful during the night, and my son David, a physician assistant, and I treated him for low blood sugar, dehydration, and dizziness from his auditory nerves that no longer worked. Again, the following morning, he had some nausea and weakness in both legs, but no one-sidedness that I've been led to believe comes with a stroke. Somehow, we got through the wedding the next afternoon, after what must have been distressing to the wedding coordinators when we walked to the altar for family pictures. As we turned, Leo lost his balance, fell on his back, pulling me down with him, with my skirt billowing up in the air. Thank goodness the ceremony hadn't yet started and neither of us was hurt. Before we drove off for the airport Sunday morning, I asked David if he thought I should take his father by the emergency room before we got on the road, and he said, I think your best bet is to get back to Dallas as soon as you can and let his doctors see him. So that was our plan. But oh my goodness, we had a perilous ride back to the St. Louis airport, the details of which I'll spare you here. Back in Dallas, our eldest son took us directly to the hospital where it was finally confirmed that Leo had suffered a stroke. We spent the remainder of the summer in the hospital, hoping Leo could be rehabilitated and come home. With my staying with him most nights because frankly I didn't have the energy to walk to the parking garage and drive home. Then came the day when I was told that the rehabilitation wasn't working and that I had a choice of his being moved to custodial care at a nursing home or bringing him home. The same day, I went to get the results of my 6-month CAT scan, at which time I learned that, sorry, the surgery didn't work and neither did the chemo, and you still have cancer. That was just about the lowest point in my life. I went down to the parking garage, threw my purse in the car, stomped my feet and yelled, and yes, cursed. Then I got in the car and drove home. Thankfully, Dr. O prescribed the oral medication, Femora, which slowed down the tumor's growth till the following January 2008. Having survived a year, and what a year, I began to realize I didn't have the option of just turning up my toes and lying down in my grave. The Lord had other plans for my life. As a matter of fact, there were to be other trips I never expected to make, such as the European river cruise with my sister Claire Helen, the following June. And more recently, a trip to New York City with my granddaughter and great-granddaughter. Continued these trips of a lifetime with the special people I cherish. The tumors sometimes continued to grow, and sometimes I received the good news that the chemotherapy has kept them stable. I am thankful now to be able to be treated with Gemzar, which has practically no unpleasant side effects and may have even caused some tumor shrinkage. I know now that God expects me to keep on working and serving others in the most productive way I can. God alone will determine when it's time for me to finish this journey and be reunited with my dear sweet husband. And this story was written by Barbara Turner. So, all right, that will be the end of my two stories for now. But as soon as I get the feeling, I will come back and read some more of the long stories that I always skipped when I read online. So until then, y'all take care of yourself. Make sure you get your your annual checks, and do know that Pap smears. When you get your annual Pap smears, it does not. It will not pick up if you have ovarian cancer. You have to take the test that's called a CA-125. CA 125, Charlie Adam 125. That's the name of the blood test that you have to take to be able to see if you have ovarian cancer. If you have breast cancer, the name of the test, it's a BRAC, BRAC1 and BRAC2. BRAC1, BRAC2. Those are the blood tests that you take to see if you have breast cancer. And do know that in a lot of cases, not all, if you have ovarian cancer, you may possibly end up having ovarian cancer. If you have ovarian cancer, you may possibly end up with breast cancer. Did I say that right? Vice versa, okay? If you got breast cancer, you may end up with ovarian cancer. You have ovarian cancer, you may end up with breast cancer. For some reason, they intertwine, okay? So if you don't remember anything else, do remember those tests. Do understand that going and getting a pap smear will not tell you if you have ovarian cancer. You have to ask for that test. The CA125, you have to ask your doctor for that test. They will not, it's not like your annual that they give yearly. You have to ask them, and a lot of times you have to like push they on to make, force them to give you that test. So, until next time, I'm out of here. Thanks. For the, and check, if, do check out the replay and listen to the stories.